The next morning, millionaire Alexei carefully opened the door to his wife's bedroom and could not believe his eyes. His wife, barely alive and pale just yesterday, was now sitting, leaning her elbows on a pillow. Next to her, on the edge of the bed, sat the same beggar woman whom he had reluctantly let in the day before. His wife was quietly laughing, listening to the guest's story, and a slight blush of life played on her cheeks. Alexei froze in the doorway. Could this really be reality? After all, just the night before he had feared the worst, thinking that his beloved might not live until the morning. Just yesterday it had seemed that there was no hope. Alexander's wife was dying from a serious illness, and the doctors could only shrug their shoulders. Alexei sat by her bed for days, tried everything, the best doctors, expensive medicines, but nothing helped. His beloved wife faded away before his eyes, and the husband's heart was breaking with pain and despair. He did not sleep at night, afraid to miss his wife's last breath. That evening, exhausted and lost, Alexei accidentally glanced out the window behind the high fence in the drizzling rain. He noticed a lonely female figure. A tramp in an old coat was hiding under a tree by the fence, trying to escape the autumn weather. Usually the millionaire fenced himself off from such people, but now his soul was moved by either pity or complete doom. Unexpectedly for himself, he invited the girl into the house, but did so reluctantly. "Okay, let her come in. I have nothing to lose." Out of bitter fatigue, he decided on his own, not knowing why. Alexei went out into the rain and called the stranger. At first she was taken aback. She looked at the venerable host with fear. "Come here, spend the night in the warmth," he said hoarsely. The woman approached, mistrustfully clutching a battered bag. She pressed her belongings to the chest. Her pale and tired face expressed amazement and hope. "Thank you," she whispered, lowering her eyes. Alexei nodded briefly and led the trembling guest into the house. In the kitchen, the housekeeper Nina was dumbfounded with surprise, seeing a poorly dressed stranger. The owner briefly ordered Nina to feed her and make the bed. "Maybe we shouldn't let her in," the housekeeper tried to object. "I've already decided everything. Just do as I asked," Alexei answered sharply. The housekeeper pursed her lips in displeasure, but obeyed, leaving the guest in the kitchen to warm up. Alexei tiptoed back into his wife's bedroom. Alexandra lay motionless, barely breathing. Her husband sat down on a chair at the head of the bed and took her cool hand in his. "Why is she suffering so much?" He thought bitterly, looking at the exhausted face of his beloved. She had done so much good for people. He remembered how cheerful and kind Alexandra had once been a teacher. She had taken care of other people's children, she had helped everyone, and now she was on the verge of death and nothing and no one could save her. Alexei closed his eyes tightly, feeling tears of helplessness. He would give all his fortune if only a miracle would happen. Unnoticed, exhausted, he dozed off right next to the bed. Without unclenching his fingers, his wife woke him up with a quiet groan. Alexei jumped up abruptly. Alexandra was choking, she was twitching convulsively, her breathing was clearly intermittent. Alexei, in a panic, grabbed the bottles on the nightstand, trying to remember what medicine to give him. His hands were shaking, his heart was pounding somewhere in his throat. "Oh my God, what should I do?" he whispered, feeling a chilling horror. Then a calm female voice was heard behind him. "Let me help." Alexei turned sharply in the doorway. There was a night guest. The stranger timidly crossed the threshold. "What are you doing to yourself?" The man winced, but another groan from his wife made him stop. "I know how to care for the sick," the woman said quietly. "Let me see your wife." Alexei stepped aside in confusion. There was no time to think. Alexandra was turning pale before his eyes. The stranger quickly approached the bed and placed her hand on the patient's forehead, then on her neck, checking her pulse. Her movements were confident and precise. Alexei was amazed to see that the woman was acting like an experienced nurse. "High temperature and palpitations," she muttered, looking at the second hand of her wristwatch. She needed fresh air and medicine for arrhythmia. She opened the window to let in the night coolness, then found a clean napkin on the table, moistened it with water and applied it to Alexandra's forehead. The patient quietly froze, but her breathing evened out a little. Alexei watched, holding his breath. The stranger, meanwhile, confidently chose the right bottle. "Are you a doctor?" Alexei asked quietly, amazed by the dexterity of the stranger. "I was a nurse," she answered just as quietly. "I'll tell you later, but now the main thing is to bring down the fever." The woman felt the patient's hand under the blanket and slightly lifted it to help her change position. "You need to put a pillow under your back to make it easier to breathe." Together, they carefully turned Alexandra on her side, placing a flat pillow under her chest. The moaning patient suddenly exhaled a little more freely. "Better already," the stranger whispered encouragingly. "If you could drink some herbal tea." "I'll bring some boiling water now," Alexei answered and ran to the kitchen. A minute later he returned with a teapot and a clean mug. The stranger took a small bunch of dried herbs from her pocket, poured out a little and poured water. A spicy aroma spread through the room. "This is my herbal infusion for the heart. TSA," she explained in a quiet voice. "Grandmother taught me to always carry a little with me." She blew on the infusion and very carefully brought the mug to the patient's lips. Alexandra was extremely weak, almost losing consciousness, but still managed to take a couple of small sips. Several tense minutes passed. Alexei sat down next to her, peering into his wife's face. Gradually, Alexandra's breathing evened out, her forehead was no longer so hot, and her lips were no longer bluish. She seemed to have calmed down, plunging into a light sleep. "It seems the crisis has passed," the woman said quietly, brushing a strand of hair from the patient's forehead. "Now I'll change her and let her rest." Alexei nodded, still stunned. Meanwhile, the stranger deftly pulled the wet sheet from under the patient. Having wiped away the sweat, they together changed Alexandra into a dry nightgown. The patient almost did not wake up, only her lips moved, as if in a dream. She was trying to say something. "That's it. Okay," the woman whispered, adjusting the blanket. "Sleep, my dear, sleep." Soon silence reigned in the bedroom. Alexandra took a deep and calm breath for the first time in a long time. Alexei could hardly believe his eyes. An hour ago he thought that he would finally lose his wife, but now his wife was sleeping peacefully, having survived a dangerous attack. He turned to the night guest, who tiredly sank into a chair by the bed. "Maria," she introduced herself, noticing his gaze. "Call me Maria. You saved her, Maria. I have no words," Alexei whispered, feeling a lump in his throat. "Thank you. That's not even the word. Don't thank me," the woman shook her head. "I'm glad I could help, but it's too early to rejoice. Your wife's condition is still very weak." "Of course, if so, stay with us a little longer, please," Alexei whispered hotly. "We need a nurse like you. I will pay you well. Just don't leave. It will be better to talk tomorrow," she answered awkwardly. "You go and sleep, and I will stay." Next to her and until the morning, Alexei wanted to object, but realized that he was falling off his feet. He took one last look at his wife. For the first time she was sleeping peacefully, without suffering, and went out, leaving Maria to watch by the bed. In the morning, an amazing picture awaited him. Alexandra came to her senses and even smiled, talking with her unexpected savior, Alexei. Still nodding in disbelief, he approached the bed. His wife weakly squeezed his hand. "I felt better." Alyosha's voice was quiet, but confident. "Thanks to Maria, this woman was like an angel. I don't know how else to explain it." Alexei stood, not believing that for the first time in many months of pain and helplessness, hope was heard again in this room. His eyes stung. He quietly approached the bed, took his wife's hand and kissed it tenderly. A light, almost childish joy sparkled in his eyes. Then he turned to Maria, the same one whom he had let into the house the day before, for some unknown reason, barely glancing at her shabby clothes and tired face. "Maria." His voice sounded muffled and restrained, but the mistrust and detachment in it were becoming less and less. "I don't even know how to thank you, honestly. You saved her." Maria stood with her eyes downcast and her hands behind her back, as if she didn't know what to do with herself. She quickly looked away and answered barely audibly, "I didn't do anything special. I was just there and did what I knew. You yourself helped me. I was let into the house when I was left completely alone." "Everyone has their own troubles," she said quietly, as if making excuses. There was no pride or high notes in her voice, only a deep, warm modesty that conveyed both weariness and dignity. At that moment, Nina, the maid, looked into the room and saw that her mistress had not only come to her senses, but was even somehow talking to her husband and smiling, albeit weakly, but sincerely. Nina gasped, pressing her palm to her chest. For a second she froze in confusion, and then came to her senses and, as if remembering how yesterday she had tried to dissuade Alexei from letting a beggar into the house, stepped forward. "Forgive me, Maria. I was simply worried about Alexei and his wife. He was in despair and only wanted the best for him. His nerves were on edge, so she flared up, not out of malice." Maria nodded, but did not answer. She did not hold a grudge. She had seen too much in life to cling to such trifles. Nina immediately turned and hurried to the kitchen to make tea and heat up the food, as if she wanted to atone for yesterday's harshness with her actions. That's what she was a good housewife for. Alexei approached Maria and lingered his gaze on her face. He was not one to change his mind easily in business. He had learned to be tough, sometimes too tough. He was used to keeping his distance, to controlling everything, so yesterday he reluctantly let a stranger into his house. Not knowing who she was, not knowing what to expect, he did it more automatically than fatigue, despair, and something in this woman's eyes did not allow him to act differently, and now he saw before him not a homeless person or a random guest, but a person to whom he was indebted. "You didn't just stay by my side, Maria," he said slowly. "You did what doctors and medicine could not achieve." She woke up with clear eyes for the first time in many days and spoke. "This is really, really you. It's like you pulled her out of somewhere. Forgive me, but who are you really, Maria?" She became a little embarrassed and slumped her shoulders. She looked away slightly, as if these words had caught her by surprise, was silent for a few seconds and only then spoke quietly. "Maria Nikolaevna, I worked as a nurse for more than 20 years, first in a children's hospital, then in a hospice, worked with different people. I am not a doctor, but I knew how to treat, how to care, when to remain silent, when to just take someone by the hand. Sometimes this is more important than an injection." She sighed and added more quietly, and then everything collapsed. "There was a disaster in the hospital where I worked. A patient died. The situation was difficult, doctors' mistakes, management negligence, but they found a scapegoat, probably because I do not know how to scream and justify myself. I was fired from work, then fired. I tried to fight, but it was useless. They took away my service housing. I had almost no money left. I moved from city to city, looking for at least some kind of work, but they did not hire me. A doctor's reputation is a fragile thing. Business, even when you are not guilty." Silence fell in the room. Saying this, Maria did not justify herself, did not complain. She simply said it as it was. Even with restraint, she stood straight, without raising her voice, and that is why her story sounded especially difficult. Alexei was silent. He understood that in front of him was a person whom the system had broken, but not crushed, a person who does not ask, but simply continues to do good. When it seemed that he had no more strength left, he turned to his wife, who nodded weakly, confirming everything without words. In her eyes was the same thought that had already formed in his own. "Maria," he said calmly but firmly, "I ask you to stay with us as long as it takes, until you can no longer be a guest, but our person. We want to officially register you, so that everything is fair. Terms of payment, respect, we definitely can't do it without you." Maria did not answer right away. It seemed she did not believe that she had heard. Then she looked away a little, lowered her hands again and clenched her fingers. Only after a moment of silence did she whisper, "Thank you. I don't know what to say. I almost forgot what it was like to be needed by someone, not just a victim, not an accident, but needed." She looked at the patient, who smiled at her weakly but sincerely, and spoke again. "I can't leave even if I wanted to. My heart is tied to her. I want to be there, not as a nurse, but as a person who cares. I know how important it is, not only injections and pills, but also eyes, voice, hands. Patients feel it, even when they are silent, they feel everything." Alexei, strict, reserved, accustomed to precision and numbers, suddenly felt his throat tighten. He nodded silently and stepped aside, as if hiding the emotions rising. Maria remained standing at the head of the bed, carefully adjusting the blanket on the shoulders of the woman, who felt better for the first time in many days, so the beggar from the street remained in the millionaire's house as a nurse under Maria's supervision. Alexandra was noticeably getting stronger every day. After 2 weeks, she could already sit a little and even walk around the room, leaning on her husband's arm. Alexei wanted to thank the woman in every possible way, more than with a good salary and a roof over her head. Then, through acquaintances, he helped restore her good name quietly, without noise, but reliably, so that when the time came and she decided to move on, the doors to the profession would be opened again, not for the sake of gratitude, but because people like Maria should work according to their calling. But most of all, he was grateful to fate for bringing this woman to his house at the most difficult moment. Looking back at recent events, Alexei understood. Despair almost destroyed him, but Maria's kind heart saved Alexandra and returned hope to their family. No one looked down on the former tramp anymore. Now Maria had become a close friend of the family, and Alexei himself remembered this lesson forever. Once he showed mercy to a random passerby, it returned with the greatest blessing, saving a loved one. Since then, joy and laughter reigned in their home again. Alexandra recovered and thanked fate every day for meeting Maria the millionaire with all her heart. He helped his new assistant start a new life and never ignored someone else's misfortune. He knew for sure, good always comes back, and miracles happen where love and compassion reign. If you are touched by this story, share it with your loved ones. Let it remind us all how important it is to remain a kind, sensitive person and be grateful. Like and subscribe so as not to miss new stories, and write in the comments from which city you are listening. It will be interesting to read them.